there's a conditioning program in society that is designed to make you limit your connection to whoever it is that you're relating with by limiting your connection to yourself. It's not only limiting your connection to yourself, but it's also manipulating the connections that you have to your loved one, your significant other, whatever that is. But so you're at least getting dumbed down on two levels, both subconsciously and consciously. One being the individual, how we think of ourselves, how we love ourselves. And like I said in the last video, you can only love somebody else as much as you love yourself. And if you don't know yourself, you can't love yourself. And if you can't love yourself, you can only love somebody else to the extent that you love yourself. You can think that you're loving somebody more than you love yourself, but that's just the game that's being played to keep you in that bubble. This is why we're conditioned to think of women a certain way. Women are conditioned to think of men a certain way. And even going into the story of the last video, how it's obvious that the mainstream media wants to portray so-called non-white people a certain way and so-called white people another way. Look at your Hollywood, look at your politics, look at your news anchors, look at your referees in the sports, in the gladiator arena, look at your successful business people, your Fortune 500 this, your Fortune 500 that, your everything is designed to maintain a particular layer of consciousness for not only a certain race of people, but different races of people are portrayed differently by the mainstream media. And that's why I said when I mention a lot of this information and people take this stuff personally as if, they start saying, we're all one and, we're all persecuted now. It's like, you're first of all, you're missing the point because you're taking this personally. When I'm talking about the colonial program and the infrastructure of the human storyline, it envelops all of the chemtrail storyline. It envelops all of this information that has come to be as of today. So all of the broken relationships, all the broken education, all the broken ideas of yourself, the political scenes that are designed to make you fight yourself and implode. We have to remove this illusory sense of power that the system has in the first place. If you remove the only way you can remove that is if you go to the depths of the origins of how this power grid was created. And the origins can be easily traced back by following a lot of these so-called conspiracy theory trails, and even something as simple as tracing back the origins of white supremacy. Just for one version or one thread to disassemble this program, to start to see more clearly how the psychological warfare works. If you want something as obvious as can be, start looking into the origins of where racism came from. How racism is used to create power in society today. How racism was used to slaughter and genocide the indigenous people across the earth. Like, how many people can actually say that they have done that? So this goes into the part where I was talking about the relationship with yourself. If you don't know your story, you can't know yourself. And people want to get around that story by creating this other story talking about we're all human, or we're all on flat earth, or we're all part of the creator and we're all the same. Saying that we're all the same is like saying you're just ignoring the depths of everything that happened before now. You will never be able to separate the physical relation, the individual from their experience. That will forever be until they're not in this physical reality anymore. So what's happening is you have this collective manipulation of both the conscious and the subconscious reality of every individual and the society as a whole, society across the board, across the earth. And what's happening is that people are replacing their own expression, their own ideas of themselves, their own perception of their soul expression. They're swapping that out for a mainstream materialistic version of whether it's masculinity, femininity, success, power, control, whatever it is that is attractive to an individual. They're going to express it. If they're locked in that program, they're going to express it from the perspective that's already been pre-positioned for them. Like, for an example, when you go into the military, they teach you how to be a soldier. And in a sense, you learn how to be a man, like a good old American man. And then they teach you all these values. They're not just teaching you how to be a soldier. They're teaching you how to be a human being. But they don't tell you that, though, because if they tell you, they're telling you, like, if they go into the infrastructure of humanity, then that will actually implode and disassemble the alchemy that is used to maintain control over you as a soldier. If you were to go into the depths of who and what you are as a soul being, as a human being, if you were to spend weeks, months, years investigating that, you will eventually raise your consciousness to a space that completely envelops every part of the military, every part of Western civilization, every single detail within this colonial mind control program. You will have processed and removed its effect on you if you've gone to those depths, because then you would have been replacing that 99% of control and manipulation that's been programmed in by basic training and your peers and society and war, the military industrial complex, everything that you think you're fighting for. You would have replaced that. And eventually people do that. And if they don't, this is why a lot of veterans have psychological issues or they end up homeless on the streets, because they've already been to that extremes of experiencing their reality and then don't have anywhere to put it or don't know what to do with it. So their relationship with themselves becomes hollowed out and empty because they've been conditioned to fill their soul, fill their life with the life of the military. And your military world becomes your world, and you're sitting in the corner somewhere. You're not even there anymore. So the camaraderie replaces your own relationship with yourself. Your relationship with taking care of your body takes precedence over taking care of the expansion of your consciousness and the expansion of your intellect and the interpreting of what's going on in society. So it's just like a soldier who's like getting ready to retire from the military, and they come up on an awakening before they're retiring. They can't start researching like the infrastructure or the what's going on with colonialism and the military industrial complex. If they were to do that, they would implode. They're researching their own selves. They're going to have to do something personally. And so once they get that information, so people know that they're going to have to do that. So what happens is most people just avoid the work. Same thing's happening in truther communities. When you talk about a particular truth, some people are just not going to go investigate that truth because they know it to be true, but they're just not ready for it. They can't open themselves up for that change, so they'll just avoid it and then try to meet you on the same level that they want to stay at. So they'll communicate with you on the same level they're trying to stay at in order to maintain their own stature in the relationship that you have with them or society overall. So this is what I'm talking about with the mixed up and chaotic relationships that we all have in our own different ways. And like I said, I'm no professional. I'm single. I've been single for a while. You can see that as a positive or a negative in reference to relationships. I see it as a positive because I've been through enough relationships in my life to realize that there was a particular style of relationship that I was engaging in before now because of the person that I was. I was engaging in relationships that were only going to there was nothing bad with them. It was just they were representative of the person that I thought I was. They weren't representative they weren't representing the person that I truly am on a deeper layer. I was still meeting women who are reflecting back to me. And this goes with friendships and family members who are in and out of your relationships. But to stay on course, and to make it more like central to people, because a lot of people can relate to relationships. you attract the challenges. You're not just attracting your love. You're not just attracting, like, that's just the fluffy fairy tale shit that we're told from Disney commercials. And we're told that Disney movie sort of romanticizing version of relationships. We're told this information in order to maintain a limited frame of consciousness, no different than the mainstream media maintains a limited frame of consciousness in order to control you. If the politics and the mainstream media can control your version of what's going on in society, how important, how potent do you think the controlling of your relationships is? Why do you think there's a single mother program going on in the inner cities? Why do you think there's a war against fathers and mothers overall? Mothers and women and men, there is a definite war going on. And as a side note, there's a slide, hopefully I remember it. Like this slide is showing you right now, this is a good example of the manipulation that goes on in society in order to keep you from going to the depths of all kinds of different storylines. So this image that you're looking at right now is showing you, I'm not looking at it right now. I remember Jim Parsons, whoever it was, talking about gay representation in the movies on Colbert. So this is a thing that so-called black people and so-called black conscious communities have been talking about for a while in reference to all these other agendas, the gay agenda, the LGBT agenda, or all these other movements, the feminine movements. All of them get lumped into this so-called black movement storyline. What a lot of people don't see is that the intention behind that is to water down and muddy everything as if everything's the same way the New Age community is talking about this oneness and unity and we're all the same way people talk about race in the New Age community, the same effect that has on people realizing what actually happened in the racial storylines, why this stuff was invented, how it has affected us in the past, how it's affecting us now. The same ignorance that is the side effect or the outcome of lumping together all of these movements is the same thing that's happening like right now in that image that you're looking at. When the last time I was hearing anything about representation in the mainstream media was talking about Black Panther, the Black Panther movie, and representation, so-called black representation in Hollywood. And I've already given my example of how that's a total mind control. They're just putting themselves out in power you need to represent yourself. You don't need any external representation in order to empower yourself. So what are you looking for the slave masters to empower you for? What are you looking for representation from a slave master for? You've already set yourself up for failure. What happens is that everybody thinks everything is the same and equal. And what happens is that next time some LGBT individual starts talking about those rights and they put them next to so-called black rights, what happens is that the history of so-called black people gets it definitely gets watered down and washed out and put on an equal playing field with LGBT and feminine movements, the feminist movement. And what happens is that you have all these speakers from the LGBT and the feminine movement now speaking for the movements, which the so-called black movement gets lumped in. And this is another way of controlling the dialogue, controlling the opposition so that you can only go so far. And this is a thing that politicians do just from existing. They talk about this kind of legislation. We're going to do this for gay rights. We're going to do this for, so-called black people. We're going to do this for jobs. We're going to do this. Like, it's in the infrastructure of the system to control how your movements, to control your dialogue. So the mainstream media does this constantly when it creates this relationship that you have with forward progress, this relationship that you have with movements. Those relationships, it's kind of like you can see these people with baggage, or you can see these movements with baggage. And then all these movements with this baggage comes to this so-called black movement, we don't have any baggage anymore. Like, well, for the groups of people who are talking without any attachment to it, who are saying like, look, we need to acknowledge all this information. This is outside of the reactionary program. This is what I'm talking about. This is not Black Panther conscious community shit. This is like the difference between the emotional consciousness and the informed consciousness. It's a difference between like an emotional so-called Black reactionary consciousness and an informed so-called Black informed consciousness. There's two different worlds and two different communities that a lot of people don't pay attention to because they just get bumped or bunched together by the mainstream media. And then the outcome is everybody thinks they're informed about what's going on because now everybody's the same and everything is okay. But that's untrue. It's not true at all. You're not going to the depths because you're just looking in reaction to, or you're not really doing the research for yourself and just taking whatever information is coming from these either YouTube creators or mainstream media or Alex Jones or whoever it is. Until we get the filters out, the preposition filters out of our reality, we're not going to know where the actual nutrients of this information is. You get all this information filtered through InfoWars and Alex Jones. He's going to suck all of the nutrients and minerals out of that in order to sell a particular agenda that fits his ideals. He's not going to go anywhere beyond that. Anything that threatens his regular flow or regular style, he will create a bubble around that in order to overtake it and drown it out. That's why he has to be so loud and emotional and so on. He's heavily vested in the emotional consciousness. He's led by the emotional consciousness with the kicker of information. So he's heavily in the higher percentage of 50-50. He's way off in the 60s, 70s of being emotionally charged because that is what sells. Just like sex sells, Alex Jones' emotion sells more than these dried out news anchors and these dried out conspiracy theorists. So this is a good setup into the idea of where we learn to relate to each other, where we learn to grow, and how we learn to perceive our reality outside of like just how we were raised. So you're raised by your parents, you get these particular styles of how to be and how to relate, mother and father, grandparents. You get all these values, for lack of a better word, because nowadays they're not even values anymore. A lot of people aren't even being raised. A lot of people are being raised by the television, social media, being raised by their siblings because the parents aren't around, and because the system is designed to be that way, to have distant parents, and you're going to have broken children and broken families, and you have broken children and broken families because you have broken parents who also came from broken families. And then you have people who are successfully broken, like this whole American dream. You have these people who are severely depressed, living in mansions and having all the food and all the resources in the world, but they're completely depressed. Their relationships are just dead and dry and empty, and there's nothing there, and their kids are a reflection of that, and they don't talk about it because they have to hold up the successful game, and that just makes the kids even more separated. They just want to become more and more separated because even in their own home they can't be honest. They can't be honest with themselves or each other in their own home because their own parents are playing a game. They're playing a role. And the kids these days are not going to play these roles. In fact, the kids are more aware of this information than a lot of these parents are, because a lot of the parents are trying to hold on to this old school information that empowers them. Like, the information is empowering. So to be presented with flat earth information, and you've already been alive for the moon landings, you've been alive for all the Apollo missions, you've been alive for the Challenger, you saw pictures of Mars and Saturn and Pluto and Jupiter, you've seen the videos, you've watched Elon Musk put a car on top of a rocket and blast it off towards Mars. You saw that stuff. And that's What empowers society is what empowers the individuals. So this whole idea of the American dream, the American way, the industrial age, the technological age, that whole thing, that's a way of being. That's a consciousness that society has adopted largely because of a lack of options. The other option was, back in the day, was the indigenous relationship that we had. But all of those societies have been, or the majority of them have either been pushed onto reservations, pushed into extinction like the Tasmanians, or just, completely washed over and demonized to where, that's just a primitive and savage nature. Where, like I've been saying in a lot of these other videos, the intelligence that we see as intelligence today is not really intelligence. This intelligence that people perceive through the university system is just regurgitation. It's just information memory. See, there's a difference between memorizing something and actually being filled with intelligent information. We all know this who went through the public education system, even the university system. If you have a great memory, you're going to get straight A's. It's just about memorizing and regurgitating shit. Whereas information that was coming from the ancestors, when you're sitting around fires and telling stories and sharing wisdom, this is information that exists inside the code of who and what you are. That little bullshit like U.S. history and African American history and all these other programs that are in your public education systems, that information doesn't exist inside the code of your blood, inside the code of your soul. That has been generated, just like heliocentrism. It's been generated to create a sort of manipulative consciousness so that you do not activate the coded information inside of you. This is the split that I've been referencing in all these other videos when I talk about colonialism. This is the split, and why I find it so difficult for a lot of people who don't see this. The split between the information that's been put out by the university system is literally synthetic intelligence. It's been generated. Where's the information that's going to help people walk through that doorway? Where's the information that's going to help people empower themselves to be able to walk through that doorway? Where's that information at? That information, what I'm saying, is coming from acknowledging all the wounds that have been inflicted on society and the individuals in order to heal before we start stepping anywhere. So what's happening is that people in the new age frame of thought, in the new age community, a lot of them haven't done that work, or they don't know how to do that work, or don't think they have to do that work, because they've replaced that work with the answer key of things like, we're all human. We're all one. We should just get over it. Racism doesn't exist anymore. Those people who did those things, they don't exist anymore. This is a new world. We're in a new age. And people, whatever prescription drugs people keep generating over and over and over again, that's being generated because the work, it's too difficult for a lot of people to look at. And if they can't even look at it, you better believe they're not even going to be able to do anything with it. They don't want to do anything with it because they don't know or think that they have to do anything with it. So that's where a lot of these blockages exist inside of the individual, and these blockages exist inside of society, whereas those blockages are not seen as blocks because they're filling holes in our beingness that we don't even know is there. They're filling holes in our society that we don't even know is there because the information has been hidden. And those holes are being filled, those blocks are filled with synthetic information. The university system fills your reality with synthetic information. The social media, mainstream media, Hollywood, your parents, your previous generations, they fill your stream of consciousness with synthetic information that has been synthetically, it's like natural food. It's been like, it's synthetic food with an organic sticker on it. And that sticker only comes because you're organic mother and father, grandparent or friend and family member, they make it organic because they actually lived through that experience. So this is why you can have such realness come from like the mainstream religions, and when people get married, and even if they're shallow as shit, or even the marriage and the certificate program, how that's just like a money making scheme for the government and all this other programming. You have the reality of, well, this is total bullshit, and then you have the other side, which is, well, that's beautiful. That's a beautiful thing to have that connection, to have that relationship. The point is, all of that beauty and all that shit gets thrown out of the window when you have to subscribe to a synthetic consciousness. But since we have a lack of options, we don't have anything else. We did have something else. When the indigenous cultures, they had, not to say that they were perfect, I'm just saying that their versions of reality, their knowledge of self, their knowledge of this experience was worlds deeper than any of the shit that's going on today. The university version of society is worse than a McDonald's drive-through of consciousness. You're constantly going through a McDonald's drive-through of consciousness, and you're left stagnant in that consciousness because you keep filling your world up with toys and plastic food and accessibility of being able to go through the drive-through, but you never get a chance to understand what your body truly desires. Like not desire is a bad word, what like the minerals and nutrients that your body, like conscious minerals and nutrients that your body needs. We don't know that stuff if we're constantly filling ourselves with breakfast, lunch, and dinner of the McDonald's drive-through of society every single day. And that's that chaotic sort of bombarding of your reality that we're experiencing with Donald Trump, and Donald Trump being talked about every single day through the media, late night talk shows. Late night talk shows, like I've said, is just another version of the news industry now. It's just another faction, another part of it in order to lighten up your society. And that's the thing, like that's like the toy in the McDonald's Happy Meal, drive-through Happy Meal, is that you're playing with a toy, you're eating fries. By the time you finish playing with the toy, your meal is done. You don't have any relationship with the food. You just shove that down your throat, and then you're happy that you got a toy. So the American dream is the toy these days, and we have these other toys. You even have loved ones who are now toys. This is why you can have all these plastic people, and then people going into relationships based on the most shallow shit. See, your soul relationship is secondary when actually your relationship with yourself should become first before you get into a relationship with somebody else. And what happens is that you have all these broken people looking for other people to fill the broken sides of them as if that's their responsibility. It's not their responsibility. They might be able to help you with that, but that's not their responsibility. And this is why you have a lot of fighting in relationships, because what happens is that in the beginnings of relationships, people are creating this space of, well, this is who I am, and you accept me for who I am, and this is who I am. Like, when that's a whole frame of consciousness, that's a whole setting up, and people know what I'm talking about when I say that. And you can feel it too when you're in this relationship. They're creating this sort of, well, you're just going to have to deal with that. And then there's no change that's ever on the syllabus. There's no like, are we going to deal with this? It's like, no, I'm accepting that as part of who I am. And if we're going to be in a relationship, you have to accept that too. And I can see how that's part of it. It's like, yeah, I get that. But there's a difference between accepting something that is self-destructive as just part of who and what you are, and acknowledging something that's self-destructive and something that you have to work on. Those are two different worlds, and two different, like I said earlier, two different kinds of people. So you have all these people dealing with all this shit and basically manipulating each other without even realizing it, manipulating each other with like in between like flirty conversations and discussions and whatever it is. There's this whole little like unspoken manipulation that largely a lot of the times people don't even realize it, because subconsciously there's a lot of things that get expressed in our conscious reality that are designed to keep us from imploding, to keep us from having to do that work because we're not ready. So this is a good example of that is like if when you meet somebody and then it might feel a certain way, but the timing might be off. So that's just not, I mean, if the timing is off, then your calibration is going to be off. Your mutual calibration is going to be all jacked up. So it doesn't matter how connected you might think you are to somebody right now. Maybe that's not how it's supposed to be right now or later. Maybe it's some lingering energies or whatever it is. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's just you having to feel these feelings and emotions so that you can process them throughout this time and then process them later eventually from a higher perspective. We have all of this work that we have to do individually, and we're already starting off on level McDonald's in the drive-thru if you don't know who you are. If you have all of these societal, conscious, and subconscious blocks, you have all this work to do. We got broken families, broken relationships with siblings, other loved ones, mothers and fathers, grandparents, friends and families, co-workers. You have all these different styles of relationships. And largely, a lot of them are going to be reflective of the society and all this generic synthetic ass information and synthetic definitions of who and what you are that we never even get into a real relationship. You don't need another broken soul to come fill the gaps of your broken ass and your broken reality and your broken friendships and your broken mommy and daddy issues, whatever the hell that is. You've already processed. You can see how that's another world. That's another thing that people are dealing with. A lot of people don't even look at that shit. They can't even acknowledge that that information exists, so it gets hidden. And what happens is that people only show their best side. It's kind of like when people put on their best clothes and they go out on the weekend, they put makeup on and all that stuff. Well, deep inside, you got some broken ass people. And what happens is that a lot of people don't even go into the depths of the broken nature of a lot of these individuals because, you know, that's secondary. It's secondary to work on your soul. It's secondary to acknowledge the information and the work that needs to be done. Everything that we have in mainstream society and reality today is largely existing in reaction to a broken system. And this broken system is so, we've empowered it so much that we don't know what else there is. And that what else there is you. We don't even know who we are. So you have a lot of these people. This is another thing that comes in too, is that a lot of the reasons why some of these people who are just like, we're all one, we're all unity, you know, this is my home and we're home now. And I'm like, okay, well, you know, what about the home of the native people? Like, are we ever going to go into the indigenous storyline? It's like, oh, well, this is our home now. Like a lot of the new agers, they have this idea of this relationship with, you know, this very extreme positive version of reality, but it's really sitting on top of a festering, bleeding out corpse that is still alive. The indigenous people are still alive, still asking questions, still posing these same arguments for the last 500 years. So it doesn't matter how spiritual or enlightened you think you are, until you acknowledge this information and put it at the forefront, you're never going to be walking down any kind of path of enlightenment. If you're bleeding out, if your heart is bleeding, you got puncture wounds all over your body, and you got 2 broken legs, I don't care how enlightened you think you are, you're not going to be able to walk anywhere. But with this whole new age mentality, it's actually an extension of manifest destiny. You have a lot of people who don't really have any connection to land. They don't have any real connection to land. Like all my ancestors have like long threads connected to both here, Louisiana and the Bay Area, specifically in Oakland, like deep roots going there for a long time. So that's literally like the earth that I come from. So we have all these storylines in Mexico too, like even that other storyline too. So we have all these storylines that exist that are existing for some people, but you have these other people who came over here, like they call them settlers and colonists. And a lot of those people, one of the outs that's being used, like the watering down, like I said, with LGBT, the feminism, to water down the so-called black movement. What's happening is that in this new age idea of star systems and star beings and indigo this and what happens is that all the ancestral indigenous storylines just get washed under the rug. All right, they just get forgotten about, and everything just gets pushed away, and then everybody says, well, this is my home now. This is my star family. And, there's nothing wrong with that. But what I'm saying is that if you don't acknowledge the other information there, you're just going to be creating another synthetic consciousness that's just going to create another problem later on down the line. You might feel all cool right now because you're connected and this and that, but you're connected with an asterisk. You got some issues that's not being dealt with because a prescription drug was just passed out, and then we just ate it up because we didn't have anything for so long. So that's another way of the the relationship that we have to land. You have the relationship to society, information, education, culture, history, politics, war, the military industrial complex, prison industrial complex. These are all relationships, and they're all kept at a particular frequency or vibration that doesn't allow you to really go any further than what the mainstream tells you to do. Through manipulating your hormones, through manipulating your food, your water, your psychology, through cartoons, through TV shows, through the education system, through politics, through all these celebrities. All of those are different forms of manipulation, can be used as different forms of manipulation, and are being used as form of manipulation to manipulate you to stay trapped within the neutral zone. At least stay in the neutral zone. Now, if you fall deeper into those mind control programs, like you get deep into the ego, you get deep into the materialistic version of reality, that's when you start going into these other shallow versions of reality. And like I was mentioning earlier with the LGBT, that they're putting hormones in milk, and if you have these feminine hormones being injected, for lack of a better word, injected into these babies for their entire life, and then you have a psychological programming of the LGBT cartoons and all this other stuff, you don't think that's going to have an effect on people, for people who are not aware that there's an LGBT or a gay agenda? That alone is enough for you to realize that something is wrong here. There's some questions that need to be asked. Why are there hormones in soy milk and almond milk, and hormones in cow's milk? Why are there any kind of hormones in that are being given to, even hormones in the vaccines? Why is this stuff in there? And this goes back to the destruction of the family, destruction of the kids, the relationships. If you create insecurities and chaos within the individual, you have a weak person. You're not going to have somebody who's going to be able to amplify the divine masculine or the divine feminine. They're not going to be able to bridge these natural relationships that we have, because the majority of their energy and their focus has been dealing with these excess hormones, psychological hormones as well, through the television and school. Like I said, these excess hormones that are being pumped in to their reality every second of every day of their lives. So we have these physical hormones and we have these psychological hormones through this synthetic intelligence, this synthetic consciousness that's affecting us in a certain way. It's making us think, act, and feel a certain way that will create overall a very weak-minded and physically weak, psychologically weak, and spiritually weak and chaotic society. Through years of family dynamics that are being destroyed, family members and matriarchs and patriarchs that are being destroyed, and from every angle, physical, intellectual, and spiritual. Marriage and reproduction is beneficial to the slave system. So this marriage and reproduction slave system this is the reason why it's promoted so much in the mainstream media. Celebrities always getting married, celebrities always having babies. You always hear about their baby talk and their baby this and their marriage this and their marriage that, but you never really hear from the actual individual. You never hear from the heart and soul of an actual person about how they feel about society, how they feel about reality, how they feel about what's going on in the world. They can't allow you to have that kind of relationship with them, because you will eventually see how dumb a lot of these celebrities are, but you will also see more human sides of them, and more in turn you'll see a more human side of yourself. And the more humanity that you see in yourself, the more inhumanity that you'll see in society, and you'll actually end up doing something about it. But if all of your life and your focus is focused only on the microcosm of you, your own kids, your own family, your own wife, your own husband, your own job, whatever it is, you can easily be controlled and manipulated, because you've created a kingdom within a kingdom. You've created a dream within a dream. And as long as your kingdom falls underneath the rank structure of the colonial kingdom, and the colonial kingdom is doing A-okay, it's just taken care of, and then you're okay. You don't have to do anything. You're successful. You have kids, you have a car, you have a job, you have a house, you have friends, you have family. That's the only thing you need to do in this reality. You can cash out whenever you like. That's the basic Big Bang Theory sort of mentality that's getting promoted pretty much each and every day. And that can be seen as another form of forced attraction. It's this social mind control or supremacy that includes like arranged marriages, and it cuts the natural zone right out. Like you're forced, like I was saying in reference to the hormones. The hormones is a forced attraction. If you want to take it that far, if you that far, you're being forced to feel, think, and act a certain way through these hormones. That's a forced attraction. What are we being kept from? When you're kept in a forced relationship, or a forced attraction, or a reactive attraction, or a professional attraction, what are you being kept away from? When you're locked into the physical attraction and it stays there, you're basically locked into a side version of emotional consciousness. They're playing your emotion, your sexual emotions are being triggered. You're also being triggered to think of this kind of woman. What kind of woman is being portrayed through Hollywood? What kind of man is being portrayed through Hollywood? What kind of character is being portrayed through Hollywood? You're being conditioned to think and be attracted to that at the same time. You're not attracted to like the uncool kid and all that, the uncool crowd and that whole thing. Oh yeah, we're not attracted to that. We're part of the cool crowd. That whole thing. You're not attracted to. You're conditioned to be attracted to the valley girl, the jock, the high school mentality, the PG-13 mentality. That's what all these movies are. They're PG-13. They're playing your child mind, because your child mind could easily be triggered emotionally. That's why everything is so emotionally charged with Trump and Twitter and politics and war and fear and lust and love and all that stuff. It's all channeled straight into your emotional strings. And as long as you keep allowing yourself to be played by those emotional strings, you're never going to be able to empower yourself to get out of that level of consciousness and actually envelop the level of consciousness of conditioning that's been affecting you and generations before you forever. So this is why we're being conditioned every day to be locked into this marriage and reproduction and physical, materialistic attraction sort of mentality to keep you neutral. When you're in the neutral zone, this is why these hormones are pumped into these kids. When you're in the neutral, and these adults, when you're in the neutral zone, that's another layer of consciousness that can be, it's uncertain for people. So this is where the whole gay agenda comes in. So where you're manipulated with the hormones and with TV and with music and with movies to quite possibly be attracted to somebody of the same sex. That whole thing, that you see how that tone was up there, that's how society is selling it to people. You're a man, but you might be attracted to men. You're a woman, but you could be attracted to women. That's how society is. You hear the tone in there. That's the tone. That's the mainstream tone of the LGBT gay agenda. That whole thing. It's that they're more focused on the insecurity of your reality than you being tapped into shit, removing all of the hormones that are there, addressing the issues of masculine and femininity, and like I said, with how this all gets watered down with the feminine and LGBT movement. Well, masculinity and femininity gets watered down with these shallow versions of, oh, well, this is what a man doesn't have to be this way to be like this, or a woman doesn't have to be this way to be that way. And then you got people just creating definitions in reaction to. They're not really creating knowledge from wisdom. They're not generating a knowledge from a wisdom that goes back generations. They're just creating some kind of reaction to. And a lot of these people who are creating these reactive definitions of reality themselves are still subjected to a lot of these hormones and all this other shit that's out there. So you have all these people who are running around with basically like these broken definitions of love, these Disney version definitions of love, where there's no intuition there. There's nothing there other than what Fox News or MSNBC has explained to people. So even people who do get into relationships that are based upon healing, they can't even get to the depths of healing themselves because the societal versions of who and what they are largely overtake the gaps in reality, the gaps and the trauma that exists in these gaps in reality. They inhibit a lot of this growth. So people don't allow themselves to get into a deeper layer of growth, even if they're with somebody that could help them grow. You have expectations, you have these gap fillers, you have escapism, you have these filler love. So you have these filler versions of love in society to keep you from going deeper, like I was saying before. You have pets who are playing, they play like this, like dogs and cats. They fill these empty gaps in your reality to where you get unconditional love every day from your pet. But where's your version of love? Like, I hear this all the time, people talking about how divine cats are. And you look at yourself. You can see easily, people can say right now, people are like, oh yeah, that's so true. Cats are so divine. And then you can think about that. But have you ever thought of yourself like that? Have you ever gotten to a point to where you've said, well, I'm divine. Like, I'm a divine ass being. Like, this is some crazy ass shit. This is tight as fuck. So, like, you can easily say it for a cat. You can say it for, like, the unconditional love of a puppy or something like that. But look at how far removed you are from even being confident in yourself and knowing that you are a divine being. Like, how much work needs to be done from you? You know, cats know that shit. Cats know it when they walk around like, human, feed me, where's my food, like, let me out. Like, they're living their world. Cats are living more free than a lot of these humans around here talking about freedom and all this shit. So you have all these generic forms of love that are and the gaps that are left behind these generic forms of love are filled with either pets or materials or jobs or just consuming or escaping drugs and alcohol and all kinds of shit. Even more love. Like, people get into like these relationships. That's where a lot of people are having these side dudes and side chicks now, is because they're trying to fill the gaps within all the different parts of their reality. And the hardest thing to do is look in yourself and be like, all right, well, this shit needs to be done. But if you can just, get an orgasm real quick, then you can just chill out for the rest of the night. You're good. That's it. You don't have to think about anything. You don't have to do anything. You basically have this, this dopamine drip of amazing, to where if you just do that every day, like, how much, it's nothing against sex and orgasm and that whole thing. I'm just saying, like, how much work spiritual work, how much intellectual work could be done if we weren't so conditioned into the materialistic physical version of attraction and relationships and so on and so forth. It's a good thing. I mean, shit, you can, if you have two people that are really in tune with each other, I mean, they can be having more sex than, or, being in more kind of relationships than like that with themselves. Like they can have more sexual orgasms all throughout the day and still get the work done, still get the spiritual and the psychological work done because they're in tune. But that's a different world in comparison to a relationship where, for example, sex holds the relationship together. That's a whole different world. It's very unstable in that world because the individuals are very unstable. And the only thing that's stable is that short amount of time that, you're connected, you're unified in that whole thing. But if your connection and your unity is only based upon that physical relationship, then you will need that over and over again to keep that spark alive. But what I'm saying is that beyond those connections, you have the intellectual attraction, you have the spiritual attraction, you have the intellectual, the psychological relationships, or the spiritual relationships. So just as much as you can get into a physical attractive relationship and not even think about psychology or think about the spirit, you get grounded by the physical attraction, and then you do that work. You feel whatever, you got mommy and daddy issues, you got relationship issues, you got trust issues, you got escapism issues, you got addiction issues, whatever issues you have, like this is the norm. And you have people getting together more frequently on like dating sites and all this other thing. So more and more work is appearing to get done, but it's not getting done. This is why you have these people who are now getting tired of these online dating sites. Like I did, it was like 2010 now, like back in 2010, like that's when I started to realize the downfalls of that and how this was affecting society and me as an individual, and what I was really looking for. So we're hitting that point to where the mind control programs of this society are hitting that peak to where people are starting to reverse it and say like something's wrong with this. Like there's no benefit in having like all these men or all these women that you're sleeping with. There's no benefit in that shit because you're just run dry and you're not worth a damn. There's nothing there to you other than, this basic physical connection that you have, which is okay up to a certain degree. But, after that point, you're asking yourself to go beyond that now. And it's only up to you to make that decision. And some things need to be said and some things need to be done in order to get out of that space. So, but it's hard to break because we have a lot of I don't want to say it's hard to break because I don't want to put that out there. It's not hard to break. If you put the work in, it's not very difficult. You're just gonna do it. The only reason why it can appear difficult is because society is based upon keeping you in those traps. That's the norm. It's difficult to get out of the social norm because once you break away from the social norm, now you're getting into a space of critical thought of yourself, critical connections with yourself, more conscious realities of yourself and your surroundings and your relationships. See, those are whole different. That's what's actually difficult, because in order to get into that space, you'll have to have processed the majority of all the garbage and the junk that's in your reality, that's in the way, that keeps you from going into the depths of a deeper relationship with yourself, and then in return, a deeper relationship with a loved one. You're manipulated. You're hit with chemtrails. You're hit with the education system. You're hit with the university system. You're hit with colonialism. You're hit with patriotism. You're hit with technology and all this other stuff that's sold to you a certain way. You're hit with all this stuff in order to keep you from going into the higher frames of consciousness that will allow you to have a deeper relationship with yourself, with nature, with your loved ones, with society as a whole, with your culture. You're kept in these broken relationships, for lack of a better terminology, in order to maintain broken people. the race agenda and white supremacy was partially designed to keep you from loving yourself, to keep you from knowing yourself and making a connection with yourself and your people. Just like that was existed, well, all of these mainstream mind control programs like heliocentrism and the way society portrays these relationships to you, all of that was also created in order to have that same effect. And once we start talking about these kinds of relationships, these kinds of interactions, we'll start to see more of what we can do to face these realities. I mean, because basically you have people that are recovering from like PTSD, like the PTSD of realizing that you've been lied to your entire lives for, ultimate control over your ancestors, yourself right now, and your future generations. This is why you have to be manipulated and controlled by celebrities who are throwing out these crazy, chaotic ideas of reality of like slavery being a choice and so on and so forth. I mean, is it really that simple? If you're consumed by the physical reality, that's just like being consumed by your emotions. Whereas if you are aware of your physical reality, that's when you can tap into that physical access point and ground yourself in to project into the higher realms of the higher mind and the spiritual relationships. If you're locking yourself into these basic, shallow relationships and these shallow interpretations of reality, you will be in many ways keeping yourself from expanding into the higher spaces. This is why the online dating thing is so fast and it's so quick, and it's all based upon physical attractions, just like the whole gym mentality that's pumped through social media. It's just lift weights and look a certain way and don't focus on your spiritual or your higher mind sort of growth. Just only care about the way you look, and then that's it. And then get a job and provide for yourself. And that's like Barney. That's like kindergarten version of humanity. And we're trapped in that space because largely we're still in that hopeless sort of idea that, well, the so-called powers that be, they're not going anywhere anytime soon, so fuck it, whatever. They're good. So as long as we're in that space, we allow them to push that mind control, push that social programming even further. Every single, as much as we allow them to push it, they'll push it. So this is why you have all of this desensitizing. This is why you have a porn star now in communication with, or in the same discussion with, the president of the United States. What this does is it totally desensitizes you to the porn industry. It desensitizes you to the sexualization of society as a whole, and it desensitizes you to regular, like, your idea of normal changes. Like when your president is a guy like Donald Trump, your ideas of normal in society adjust. This is why you see so many things that are just so jacked up right now, and you have these people who are saying the most racist and out of line shit, all over the place, because they've been given the platform to express that low budget, low ass consciousness. And it's not like it hasn't been there before. They just been hiding it. That's what I've been telling people who say, oh, well, that stuff happened a long time ago and those people don't exist anymore. Yeah, look around. See a lot of these so-called Trump supporters and all this other shit, and see if you can still say that. If they were given the okay to lynch people today, how many people you think would be lynched there? They're still doing it. And since people are so desensitized to their relationship with their family, with each other, with themselves, they have no empathy. They have no humanity. There's no connection there anymore. And that's ultimately what all this desensitization and over-sexualization and overstimulation in society is used for. As long as you keep adding to the broken nature of society, you can maintain the emptiness of the individual, which then maintains the emptiness of society. And as long as you keep making all of this stuff accessible, like the drive-through of the McDonald's, just like porn, and you can't go on social media without seeing somebody shaking their ass or Beyonce being praised by the first lady, Michelle Obama, talking about, oh yeah, she couldn't be a better role model for my kid and my kids. And then you have all these celebrities who are just flaunting. You got Cardi B out there talking all her shit. Now it's about her having a baby and so on and so. You see how shallow this is. What needs to be done is the shit that needs to be undone first. Stop fighting yourself. Stop destroying yourself. Start healing these wounds inflicted by the society overall. Stop putting these expectations out on a system who doesn't care for you in the first place. Your work is solely your own, and people who are around you can only help you get into doing your own work. Nobody can do your work for you. So if you're asking for things we should do and all this other stuff, ask yourself if you've done everything that you need to do. Because if you start doing the things that you thought you did, but you didn't completely do, you didn't finish them, if you actually did that work, you wouldn't be asking the question. Largely, a lot of people wouldn't even ask the question of what we should do because their plates would be full of things to do. There would be so many things that you could do because you are now your own teacher. That's what I'm trying to help people see with a lot of these videos. In order to break out, you cannot become your own teacher if you're just hopeless and you're waiting for the world to teach you. If you're waiting for the system to change to affect you, you're the only one that can change. Like you're at the beginning. You're at the epicenter of the change that needs to be done. And it takes entire lifetimes for people to get in that kind of work and actually do something that's going to make any kind of change. So if you're looking for things, if you're like, find it. Ask better questions. You'll figure it out.